Hey, Tony.
Brother, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well, man. Thank you for jumping on with us. I
Yeah.
know it's kind of quick, and I was like, oh man, that'd be a great topic to talk about. So, I was thinking, man, we talk a little bit about the building a community around our grief, and coming from a man's perspective, you know, I think that what we what we initially need when we're building that community is our necessities in order to
hmm
start the healing process. So, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about that. What do you
Sure.
think are some of the necessities that you can look for when building a community?
Well, I think for me, the necessity, I think, came out of, I think, the realization that I couldn't do this by myself,
Right.
that I couldn't deal with the death of my daughter in a vacuum. So part of that was coming to the fact that I needed something more than just relying on my own resources or my own. Maybe I can find you know work my way through grief. Maybe I can find a way to um, to just basically do this on my own. I could not do that. So I think the first part was allowing, when my wife Sherry said to me, I found this good bereaved parent support group. Let's go to that. And I said, well, I'm going to go. And I did kind of, Tony, like the typical male man response. I said, well, I'm going to go to support you, but I'll go with you. And then when I went into the meeting for the first time, I saw other men and women who were dealing with the same pain of losing a child as I did. And I realized very quickly that this group was going to be as much for me as it was going to be for my wife. And I think that was the first thing, was realizing that I could not do this alone, that the coping resources that I developed to kind of silently work through challenges before wasn't going to work, that I needed more. So that was the first step, in terms of realizing that, I needed a community around me. I needed to gradually build that community, um, you know, to build that community, um, through that type of excuse me, I'm going to turn off my notifications. These things are bothering. So I apologize for that. I felt I was distracted a little bit because I heard boom, boom, boom. And I know this is an organic workshop and an organic thing, but that still distracted me a little bit. So the realization was, one, that I needed a community. And then from there, I was able to get together with a group of other parents to build our own community, where we invited men, women, and siblings to join us so that we could support each other in our grief. So once I had the realization that I needed a community, an existing community, it was easy for me to build, to reach out and try to build a community of my own.
And one of the things I found, that when I was looking for a community, people that I can relate to, there was a lot of things that came into fact. Well, it came into play. Is it a place that is this the sort of support group that I can feel free to express myself in as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
without judgment, without ridicule or anything like that. And also, is it a place where I can learn from? So,
Yeah.
those are some of the things. And I know some people function better in a place where they can just be free to talk. And some people, need that extra support where they're actually learning. Like they have guest speakers come in and things like that, or they
Mm-hmm.
do like certain activities to develop those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found out a lot of the times where people were getting into these support groups and finding themselves lost. because there was nobody in there that was giving them what they were needing.
Exactly.
So, and a lot of times they don't know where to look, so I tell them, narrow it down. Just narrow it down.
Yeah.
Build something around your loss. Like if you've lost a child or a spouse or anything like that, you want to be around people that can actually relate to you as well. But also, is it going to be a place where people are respectful of you?
Exactly. And I think one of the things, and I worked, prior to, to embarking on a path of doing bereavement support and, trying to help others navigate challenges through grief. I was an addictions professional for 27 years, and I would have clients, and motivated clients, Tony, come up to me. And as you know, that being a part of a 12-step support group system is extremely crucial for individuals with substance use issues to be able to have success at recovery. I've had clients come up to me and say, I went to a support group meeting and it didn't meet my needs. They were doing things that were inconsistent with the 12-step philosophy, even to the point where there were some meetings where individuals were actually witnessing people dealing drugs.
Right.
And so they would say to me, well, what should I do? I said, well, we're going to find another meeting that's going to support your goals, where you're going to be able to relate, where you're going to be able to share. We're going to find a community that's going to be able to support that. And I tell individuals, if they find a community that does not meet their needs, they need to find another community. And individuals who are motivated to change or to whatever their challenge is, whether it's addiction, whether it's transcending loss, they're going to want to find a community that's going to support that. And so that's what we do. Let's find a community that's going to support your needs, support your philosophies, or without judgment, and also where you can learn, like you said, where they can bring in guest speakers, where we can learn from each other. I mean, even Tony, when I teach in Utica University, I tell my students, within every student lies a great teacher, and within every great teacher lies a great student. And if we can go in with that philosophy, we're going to learn from each other. We're going to not only build a community of support that's going to help us transcend our challenges, but we're going to build a community that's going to be inclusive, that's going to be tolerant, that's going to be the world that we envision. It's going to be, we can build our own heaven on earth. Right. If we can embrace the teacher and the students and all of us. Because if we can do that, then what we're doing is committing to listening, to witnessing, and to learning from each other and growing with and through each other.
Yep, that is very, very true. I think communication is another thing as well. Understanding how to communicate with each other. Are you speaking the same language? I've seen people get caught up in that as well. And what I mean by that, sometimes they get talked into a group from a friend, and they go there and they realize that they don't understand each other. They're speaking totally different. But then I've seen people go to other groups as well, and the communication, there was different sources of communication. Like there was the verbal communication, but there was also the communication through the love languages, and I've seen beautiful friendships being blossomed out of that as well. And I don't think people really pay attention to that. They really, that's one of the things that people really don't understand. And I think it's important that you understand. You got to make sure that even when you cannot speak in a verbal manner, that you have those that communicate with you through your love languages, because it's well received.
Yep.
And so it's like take a chance to let someone in, and just see. Not everybody may not fit, but you still will have that friendship with them. And then you find those that that you have that friendship outside of that group, where you can actually encourage each other to do things. You talk to each other on the phones and things like that. And what are some of the things that you've seen in that aspect as well?
Well, I think one of the things with communication, and I think the key in terms of building any type of community is don't assume you understand what somebody's communication means. Is ask them. Like, for example, if somebody tells me that I'm feeling depressed today, I'm not going to assume that I know what depression means according to a textbook definition. I'm going to ask them behaviorally, what does depression mean for you? And they may describe behaviors that are more, I'm more anxious. And sometimes depression and anxiety goes hand in hand. And the other thing, too, about communication, what really tends to get understated, I think, a lot, is that in order for us to be able to effectively communicate, we need to be able to effectively listen first. If I were going to meet you for the first time, Tony, you wanted to be a part of my community, I would think one of the things that you would want to know is, am I going to be listened to? Is Dave going to listen to me? Is he going to be attuned to my nonverbal language? Is he going to be attuned to what I want? Is he what I need? Is he going to be attuned to my specific language of grief, how I conceptualize death? And is Dave willing to meet me there? And I think that tends to really get overlooked, because if we don't establish ourselves as listeners first, we can't build a community. If I'm busy talking while you're trying to tell me your story or explain your perspective, I'm going to miss a really valuable piece about you that could help me understand you and help you integrate into my communities, into our community seamlessly. So if we're going to build a community of grief, before we begin to try to verbalize understanding, we have to listen so that we can understand. So to be understood, we have to understand, we have to understand where the other person is coming from before we can communicate what we believe their perspectives are, our observations first. And sometimes I think that tends to get overlooked.
It's a really overlooked thing, and it's so simple. And I think a lot of miscommunication comes from that as well. Not being able to do that, or expecting someone to be on the same page or the same level.
Yep.
Where you're at in your grief. I tell
That's right.
Where I'm at, I don't expect you to be there. My job is to walk with you. So I'm going to come and meet you where you're at. And that way you can take the necessary steps and start the healing process, but also be able to bond with other people as well. Without expectations or from watching someone else who have been walking that path for 10 to 15 years. I can't imagine what that stage would look like for me, in year 10. I don't know. I can only speak from stage year 6 right now, That's so right. It's a growing process, without expectations, but allowing yourself to go through it so you can heal and begin to come to a place of where you can start to feel some sort of joy and wanting to be motivated to go do things. Yeah. But it takes time. And so, I think that's important in the community. You need that time. Grief is it's not linear, No. It's not that you just wake up one day and it's just over. No, it's something that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. But walking with people who are patient with you and helping you develop that patience for yourself, I think is key as well.
You're right, and I think we have to understand in the context of grief, time is relative. It isn't linear. I had mentioned in my Pieces of Me workshop this morning that it doesn't matter if you're 2 years removed from your loss, 5 years removed from your loss, 20 years removed from your loss. Depending on what's going on at any particular moment, you're going to return to the raw pain of grief. You're going to experience sadness. You're going to experience, feelings of yearning. But what I've discovered is that, almost 19 plus years since my daughter Janine transitioned, I realized that those moments are teaching moments for me now. That I can experience the pain, but it inevitably has something to teach me, and I also learned to expect it as part of the process, and just know how to manage it better. And I think that's important too in building communities, that those individuals who are later in the process can begin to acknowledge, yeah, I still have my bad days, I still have my bad moments, but this is what I've learned to do to transcend it. I've also learned to expect that there's, like in life, there's going to be moments of joy, there's going to be moments of sadness, there's going to be moments of longing, there's going to be moments of confusion. But it's all part of our ability to become genuine with those feelings if we can embrace them and understand that we can learn from them as well too. So, and that's also part, I think, in terms of building long-lasting communities, is being able to understand that and respect the fact that grieving is going to be a lifelong process. It's going to be for many a lifelong process. We don't forget those people who made an impact in our lives. And also what I think is important to build communities of grief is to support those individuals who wish to maintain continued bonds or connections with their loved ones, because that is a normal part of getting through the grief process. And if there's a community that doesn't support that, I encourage individuals to find one that does. And research has shown that we being able to maintain the relationships with our loved ones, keep those relationships, in the forefront of our consciousness, helps us to work through grief, helps us to accept that our worlds are different, and it helps us find peace, because we don't have to subscribe to society's narrative that you grieve for a specific time. Put your grief in a box, compartmentalize it, and move on and proceed with life as normal. Every loss that we have changes the landscape of our lives. And that also has to be acknowledged in a community that you're gonna want to work with and to be a part of to help you through your grief. That has to be acknowledged to me, that grief permanently alters the landscape. The physical absence of our loved ones changes our physical world. And every loss, I think, for me, requires us to say, okay, how has our landscape changed? What are we going to do to re-engage and find meaning in a changed landscape again? And what has to change to do that?
Yeah, most definitely, totally. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, that right there is, very important. That's a very important aspect of it. It's, feeling, also, like you said, feeling accepted. Or is it offering you, is it offering you what you need in those many areas as well, as far as, your spiritual needs, your emotional needs, because, everyone is different. Maybe, they're looking for something not faith-based. Maybe they are, so you get those in. I've seen people get mixed up in that as well, and go in there and totally feel like that they were getting beat up on us and did the same thing. Get out of that group, right? Yep. And then they get out of the group and they go, well, where do I go next? I said, well, now that we understand that this part is not for you, let's look over here at something different. So having those resources readily available for those individuals, so they are comfortable, especially when it comes down to men, right? We already have a hard enough time. And we often won't look for that support because we think every support group or every, everyone is the same, because we've been taught. And so it's taking all of that and stripping away those things and putting them in an area where they have either individuals that look like them. They may be, BIPOC, they may be POC, they may, no matter what they are, it's putting them around people that they can relate to in a community as well, And I think once you start to do that, it kind of opens up those doors. Out of those communities, I've seen people just peel back layers and start to walk backwards, because then they start to question themselves like, okay, I'm here now, so I'm watching everyone. I wonder, what they're saying, if it's something that I can use. So having those tools, having people who have walked it, be able to share those tools willingly about it, right? And just go, this is what I did for mind, but you have multiple people that use different things. And you can kind of take bits and pieces of it and see what works, you know, as long as it's not doing bodily harm to you.
That's right. And, for me, and one of the things that I talk about a lot is, what do you believe? And what you believe may be different than I believe. Okay. But the thing is that, can what you believe teach me and give me something to expand my perspective?
Right.
And the other part, and I know you mentioned, some people will get turned off by, just simply faith-based approaches. But there's room for everything. You can't have a discussion in a community of spirituality without talking about faith-based approaches. That's got to be part of the conversation. But I can tell you, I kind of consider myself to be like and I'll go according to Kent Nurburn, who's one of my favorite writers. He describes himself as a guerrilla spiritualist. He takes a little bit of Buddhism, he takes a little bit of Native American teachings, a little bit of Christianity, and I do the same thing to try to expand and incorporate my belief systems. I take what works for me. And if we're going to build a community of grief, we need to be able to present different perspectives to promote critical thinking and to give individuals options in terms of how they wish to expand their belief systems to re-engage in life and to rebuild their assumptive world. I tell my students, I tell anybody, so we can't build critical thinking skills if we just give individuals stuff we feel is going to meet their existing perspectives or is going to fit with their existing value systems. I believe we need to give individuals options, choices, to allow them to choose, to say what's going to fit for me. And in a community of grief, it's not only providing resources or speakers, it's also providing those speakers who can present different options, different ways, that perspectives or tools that we can utilize to rebuild our assumptive world and learn to re-engage in life with meaning again, after any kind of loss, after any kind of life challenge. And so these are the types of communities I look for, those that are willing to be tolerant, to listen, and to be open to different perspectives. I'll give you an example, Tony, if I can.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a very good friend of mine. His name is Chris Munch. Chris and I, how we met, this would take another hour to even set up how we even met. Okay. It was, you talk about divine intervention, God's will, the will of the universe, any way you want to look at this. We met for 5 minutes at a Bereaved Parents of the USA conference. And we met because in my keynote speech, I mentioned Neil Peart, the drummer from Rush, whose daughter and wife died within a 10-month period of time in 1997 and 1998, and he took to the road, took a 55,000-mile road trip to basically find himself, to go within, and eventually he did that and he re-engaged in life again. Chris Munch, after his son died and his second marriage broke up, he did pretty much a mini road trip, and he built 48 birdhouses in honor of his son in all the lower states, and he did Neil Peart's trip. Had I not mentioned Neil Peart, I would not have met Chris Munch. Chris and I have very different views on grief. I'm into teachings of animals and natures and signs. He builds houses. I told him the only thing I can build are club sandwiches, and that's probably, that's the only thing we have in common. But we are also, we consider ourselves to be brothers from another mother. He's another one of my soul brothers. And the reason that it is that when he talks about building a house and equating building a house to rebuilding your life after loss, and I talk about teachings of animals and natures and signs, we are both interested. We get wide-eyed, we get excited, and we want to learn from each other. And that's why it works. We're totally different, but we're willing to learn from each other. We respect the paths that we've taken. We respect that, and we want to learn from it. And I mean, Chris and I would be kind of a microcosm of how you would want to build an entire community of grief. You would want to have individuals of those different perspectives who, again, were willing to engage, willing to learn, and do it without judgment, as he had mentioned earlier.
So I like what you just said right there, the engagement part, because I know it's hard for some people to engage others and have conversations about it, because oftentimes they don't know what to expect, right?
Yeah.
Here you are going through it, your emotions are running high, and we get that, we really do, and it's seeing how others engage with them. How do you make them feel comfortable, and how do you encourage them to want to come out and speak?
Yep.
Is the conversation aggressive? Are you being mindful of the space that you're in with this individual? And I think that's important as well, being mindful. I tell a lot of people who facilitate these trauma and grief groups, understand that when you're holding space with them, you want to be a visitor with them. Make sure they have the things that they need. So if you go to their home or something like that, because some people, they don't feel comfortable in a group setting. They're just not ready for that just yet. But they are willing to sit down with you. So I always tell them, make an offer to go to their house, go to their home.
Yeah.
So they will come to you, And so therefore, you're keeping them in their comfort zone, and that's a plus as you start to work forward. The next thing is, while you're there, offer to go get them some water. Become that perfect visitor for them. And so therefore, they don't feel as if they have to work.
That's right.
And they're not distracted by, trying to people please you. So, take the time and offer them. Can you, ask them if you can make them some tea or coffee, and you come and sit down with them, and you just sit there with them. You let them lead the conversation. When you're doing that, you let them lead the conversation, because in that conversation, people have a tendency to tell you exactly what they need, right?
Yep.
And our job as facilitators is to listen for what they're telling us and meet those needs for them.
Yep.
So you'd be encouraged to want to call you again, and love to get those second and third calls, don't we? Because we know that they're at least taking the initiative to take the steps in the right direction and aid in their healing.
Yep. And I think when we establish ourselves, and it was funny, I was thinking of a book that I read by the late Richard Marcinko, who was a Navy SEAL commander, and he did a lot of very high profile special ops, in the Navy. And he became a consultant to business using Navy SEAL principles. And what he said, he talked about servant leadership. And what he said was, we're just all humble servants to a noble cause. And when we walk into somebody's house and we offer in their homes, where they're comfortable, can we get you something? Can I make some tea? Show me where everything is. I'd like to make you a cup of tea. That in and of itself sends such a powerful message that you are willing to meet that person where they're at, in their comfort zone. And in that sense, they become empowered. And communities of that, so I think solid communities where they build a community of grief or a community around any topic, if members feel empowered, they feel validated, we're going to empower each other. And as facilitators, all we have to do is sit back and guide the process, if that happens in a group setting. But that's that kind of message that's real powerful. When you come into somebody's comfort zone and say, I'm willing to meet you where you're at in the comfort zone. What can I do? I respect your space. I know this is your sacred space. I want to show you and validate that belief by just doing something small for me. It's sometimes just the little things. And the other thing it reminds me of is, Ram Dass, the late Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home, and we are. We're all just, no matter what walk of life we come from, what ethnic group we come from, what circumstances we come from, we're all just walking each other home. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we do when we build those communities. We establish that, hey, we're just walking each other home. And we're here to walk each other across on your path the way you lead us on that path. And it's always, like you said, we take the lead of that individual who we're working with. And every individual is going to open a door in terms of how of where they're going to let you in. We just have to walk. We just have to walk in it, and we have to work within that door that they open. And then from there, other doors open, and the communities begin to grow and become further empowered and validated because they know their voice is going to be heard.
That's very true. That's very, very true. And I couldn't have said it any more perfect than that, because I guess I've seen that happen. And people tend to not pay attention to those small details because a lot of times they're in a rush as well. They're in a rush, and sometimes it's not received well, right? Because sometimes I've seen people come in and go, I want everything right now, right? And so when they're not getting that, it tends to become toxic and combative, and I tell people that as well, like facilitators, like, yeah, that's part of it. It's part of it. Don't get upset, don't react to what they're doing. Respond to them. Because those moments right there is when they need your kindness the most.
That's right.
So don't be quick to turn them away because you're misreading what they're doing. Remember, everyone is going to be different. I've seen people walk into groups and sit back and pretty much just angry at everything. But the fact is that they keep showing up, right? And I tell the guys, look, they're still showing up. They're just angry. So think of when you were there, and what you were going through. So now you have a sort of relationship. Take yourself back there and allow this person to express themselves. It's part of their grief. Don't be upset about it, and please don't take it personally. And a lot of times what I found too in some communities is that, or when you have heart-centered people, they have a tendency of sharing their stories too much. Or it feels like they're comparing, and I've seen people back away from that as well. I always tell people, look, man, your story has no place here. You're let them be open to it. Let them guide the conversation, like your experiences and everything, because it's going to be misconceived. And once you do that, if you're a male or a female, you may close up and they may not want to come back out because they're going to feel that everyone else is the same way. They're going to say, oh, I gave this person a chance, and they pretty much did not validate it, right?
Yeah.
They didn't hear me.
Yeah, and that's and the biggest key is when we express vulnerability, and we will, is our vulnerability going to be responded to? Are we going to be heard? And I had mentioned, I think I was with Jenny Diltz in her workshop today. We talked about vulnerability, and vulnerability means that if I have a feeling and if I'm feeling out of control, I can trust you, Tony, to help me with that feeling at that particular moment. And it doesn't mean that we have to build a long-standing relationship. It just means I'm comfortable enough with you and other members of my community to say, I believe you are the people that can help me get through this. And vulnerability is doing that. Now, in other situations, I think where you describe where a person feels cut off, they're going to say, well, geez, every time I was vulnerable, I wasn't heard or I was hurt. So therefore, I'm not going to be vulnerable anymore. And that cuts that off. There are a lot of transient angels that I've been vulnerable with that came into my life for a period of time, but they helped me through a particular moment, a particular feeling, a particular moment of crisis that I was in. And, I never saw that person again. But for that moment, they helped me get through that feeling. And I just said, I feel good now. And that's vulnerability. Am I comfortable enough to share a feeling, knowing that you're going to respect it, knowing that you're going to honor it, knowing that you're going to help me make sense out of it and be a sounding board for it? And that's what it's about. And without any conditions that we have to, develop a relationship beyond that. and the trust that you're not going to hurt me by sharing. You're not going to see my vulnerability as being a weakness or something that does not align with your value system, and therefore something that you can't identify with. Because being rejected or not being heard is probably one of the ways that we destroy relationships pretty quickly as soon as they're built. Once a person feels they're not heard, they're not going to come back. They're not going to come back to that community.
Yeah, I can relate to that on a personal level, because in the beginning stages when I was looking for, when I got to the point where I realized I needed that help, and I went out to, I kept trying to keep the same people around me. I kept trying to keep my community that I was familiar with. And, those same things happen. People, it didn't mean any harm. And I realize that now, right? It didn't mean any harm. It was just that everything about me had changed and I didn't even know what I needed. So, because I didn't know what to look for. And I struggle, and I want to keep people that are going through it right now from having to struggle by taking the experiences that we have, taking the knowledge and being able to use it, and being able to efficiently identify what you need when you're searching for these things. Because I know for me, it was like you said, it was like, I was around people that I started taking things personally, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And it was another part of me that was going, you know what, this is a waste of time. I don't want to do this anymore. And so, I don't know, my mind had changed, and I started thinking to myself, yeah, it has to be other people out here like me. Everybody can't be this way. And I've had people that were close to me that, I don't know, I used to get angry with all the time because I used to feel they used to say some stupid stuff to me, and I just look at them and go, wow, I can't believe you just said that. And when I stepped outside of that and looked back on it, I was going, wow, I just took that personally. That individual was trying to relate to me from their own perspective. They were doing the best they could. Yeah. So I began to accept it because I didn't want anyone to understand. I didn't want anyone to understand what I was going through. And so I took it and I became humbled that he had even tried. And so that's what I want to tell people. When you're looking for these things, just remember your family members and things like that, they don't understand the things that you're going through. No. So you have to have some patience with them, but most of all, have some patience with yourself. Take the time to do some self-care, things like that, until you can figure out the next step. And have one person that you can at least call, that you can just talk to about anything. Well, and they're going to, they're going to be the ones that are there going, okay, look, I get what you're saying. They're going to help you get to the next step. And it's just like you said, transient angels, right? Sometimes they're there to hand you off to the right people, and so it's like, yeah, man, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone, that walk with me in those little spurts. And I do understand their journeys had taken them different places, so I wish them well along the way. It wasn't personal anymore, right? Yeah. And but they were handing me off to different people, and I mean, I do the same thing with them as well. With a few people that I've met along the way, like, here you go. You can do work with this individual when I can. I just kept going on my own direction, but it was a journey. So I want people to encourage yourself to go out there and seek these needs. Seek what you need, your own self after you figure it out. But. Be willing to let other people walk with you as you figure it out. These people are not here to harm you, right? You know what I'm saying? They just want to make sure that you get to your destination safely.
Yeah. And most people who say what we consider to be real stupid things most of the time don't do that intentionally. Right. I mean, I also tell people, look at their intent behind it. They mean to say something insensitive. And if the intentions were good, don't take it personally. Plus, if we personalize everything that was said to us that we thought was, and we really really personalized it. We're leaking a lot of energy, Tony, that in early grief we don't have, and that just makes us more tired for the long haul. I mean, we know grief is a marathon and not a sprint. So anytime that you can kind of just, and I think what communities of grief can help individuals discern when it's time to expend energy and when it's time to kind of just you pick which battle you're going to fight. You pick what you're going to respond to. And I think that's extremely important because we don't have to respond to everything, but we have to respond to the important things. And we have to be willing to let people know when we really feel that we need to, that it's meaningful and that we're passionate about it, that this is how we choose to be seen. These are the experiences we're willing to entertain in our life. These are the experiences we're going to leave outside of our life for now. And we have to be able to do that, but we also have to be able to know when to do that and not respond to everything, because energy is at a premium, particularly in early grief. And even later on, as our responsibilities as individuals who I'll call as humble servants to a noble cause, when we're doing servant leadership, when we're doing service, when we're doing companionship, we also have to be aware of that as well, too, because we have to take care of ourselves if we're going to continue to do the work that, that our circumstances destined us to do. And that's also another important piece. And I can tell you one example, if you don't mind me sharing this story. And this involves, I was at my daughter's wake, and we had traditional calling hours, open casket, and one of the people who came through was a Jesuit nun, and I remembered her because she was the kind of the spiritual advisor for the hospital that my daughter was in, that Janine was in. And she came to the calling hours, looked at my daughter's open casket, and looked at me and said, "I have never seen her that peaceful." Now understand the context of all this. She sees my daughter, who is lifeless in the casket, and tells me that she never saw her looking so peaceful. And the sarcastic side of me is saying, well, it doesn't get any more peaceful than death, So what did you mean by that? Then I stopped. And this was one of the benefits of being in shock and numbness, is that it kind of helped me take it back a notch. And I remembered the context to which she said that. There was a time in early January 2003, probably about 2 months before she transitioned, that Tony, my daughter, was in so much pain. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. They could not get enough pain medication in her to get her pain down. And it took about 2 hours before she finally became comfortable. That Jesuit nun was there for the entire thing. And that's when I put two and two together. That's what she meant. Because she saw Janine when she was at the height of her pain and certainly not at peace. And I also remember going home and I looked up at the sky and I had a conversation with God. I said, God, and this is what I said to him, Tony. I said, quit busting my chops. Either take her or cure her. Make up your mind. But I don't want to see her suffer anymore. And all of that came rushing back to me with that one statement. But I remembered the context and what she said, and I got it. And her intent was good. That what she meant was that she was good to see her no longer in pain. Now, if I had taken that literally, I might have been arrested for punching out a nun, the way I was feeling at that point. And that would not have been good because I probably would be not here right now, So, but I stepped back and it was shock, divine intervention, but something held me back and said, what did she mean by that? And then I remembered. So most people don't tend to say things that are going to intentionally anger us. It's just, they mean well. They just, in many times, don't know what to say, or they're not aware of how it came out. And I've learned, And I tell everybody, we're not here to do this perfect, and we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But if our intentions are good, we can learn from it, and we can, be tolerant. And even in the best communities of grief, there are going to be things that are going to be said that are going to be misconstrued. But if we make that, if we are comfortable enough and vulnerable enough to say, well, let's roll that back. What exactly did you mean by that? I'm not sure I understand where you're coming from. Or how did you come to that particular perspective? And how did you get there? How did you get there? What were your beliefs? What caused you to frame it in that way? What influenced it? In this way, rather than react, we become proactive and seek to understand. And we end up coming to a greater understanding with each other.
I definitely totally agree when you were saying that. Like I said, we've talked before, and you're my brother from another mother. You just we walked similar paths and not even known it, right?
That's right.
That took me back to a place when you were saying that, and I felt that in my heart, because something similar like that. After I lost my son, someone came up to me and said, "I understand. I understand how you feel. I lost my dog to, yeah." And I was like, the first thing I did was turned around and I gave him this blank stare, like, you just compared your dog to me losing my son.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't do anything because I was mad. I was like, it's like, I'm about to punch this. I can't believe he just did that.
Yeah.
Like, how does that even compare? But like you said, walking away, and I was actually at church at that time. I had went back in because I was trying to prove something to myself, right? I was trying to prove to myself and to everyone else that no matter what happens to me, this life is not going to beat me down. You can do whatever you want. You're not going to beat me down. So it was a selfish thing. I went back to the church to do something like that. Primarily, I was pointing back in God's face, going, "You can't hurt me." And I didn't realize it. I was in a stage of anger. And when that guy said that, I took it so personally that I just looked up and said, "And you bring me here for what?" Well, like, no, I'm done with you right now. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And I ended up walking around trying to clear my head because I was mad. And like you said, it dawned on me, don't take it personal. I started seeing the similarities of what he was saying about, his dog was his family.
And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
In his mind, because that's all he had was his dog. He had that dog ever since, and that was his baby, right? So very similar, just different species.
Yep.
And so who am I to tell this person that he doesn't feel that way?
For him, that was his worst loss.
Right.
And he was trying to equate, which you're right. I mean, you can't compare the loss of a child, adult or infant child or newborn death. You can't compare it to pet loss. Sure, our pets are very important in our lives, and I've put down numerous pets that have, and I've experienced intense grief as a result of that. But certainly, it obviously doesn't compare. But for him, that was his worst loss, and he was trying, and he was. I think he was trying to equate that. He was trying to try to tell you, look, I know how you feel. I had the worst loss of my life was when I lost my dog, and that was between the lines. Read between the lines, but we're not doing it at that point because we're in early grief. Many of us aren't thinking straight, and when we hear that, it's like, phew, what are you? It's like, what are you smoking? You would say something like that to me, Wow. But I guess most people don't intend to hurt. They just don't know what to say.
Exactly.
And it's just, I've kind of looked at it and said, and it also gets to you. I'm sure you've heard of Don Miguel Ruiz and the 4 Agreements that he wrote, where you can live your life by 4 basic principles. One of them is don't take things personally. And he said, nothing that is ever said to you is actually about you. Don't take it personally. It's where that other person is coming from. That was his perspective. That was he thought that was going to be the most comforting thing to say to you. He thought that was going to provide you comfort. Maybe he read it in a book. Maybe he went to a seminar where he said, this is how you establish universality with other people who have experienced loss. And he got misinformation. But in good faith, he thought it was good information, pass it on to you. But we do tend to personalize it. And if we can separate our own emotion from the other person's behavior and realize it's about what his perspective is and is not meant to personally hurt us, wow, then we can kind of temper our reaction and conserve our energy to move forward in another point of our grief where we're going to need that energy. But it's not always easy. It's not always easy to do that. And, 19 plus years in the journey, and I'm sure, has given me kind of perspective to look back and say, okay, now I get it. But in the heat of the moment, Tony, I wouldn't have got it. But the good thing for me is that what we perceive other people to say is insensitive or stupid, I learned from that and say I'm very mindful of what I say to people now. Right. And I'm very mindful of not saying the same things, because if we're going to build communities of grace, we have to be mindful of our verbiage. We have to be mindful of how we come across. Like, I never ask somebody how they're doing anymore. I'll ask them, how are you doing in this moment? How are you doing today? Because how they're doing in general might be too much for them to think about. So I'm always aware of what I'm saying, and I'm trying to be mindful of what type of language am I going to use that's going to help me build a community as opposed to destroy a community.
Right. And when you say that, building a community versus destroying it, right? I've been a part of that as well. Before I actually found and started to build those building blocks in that community, because I had to create my community. I wanted to attract other men, but I didn't know where to look. But men who were going through it were stopping me and talking to me about it, and I was going, wow, this is something. This is definitely something. And I ran across people, of course, that was very toxic. And they taught me a lesson in that aspect as well, trying to walk with them, and pretty much almost destroyed my community. So I made those mistakes. I made, and you make those mistakes along the way, but you learn to be better, and you learn to have discernment. Like you said, being very, very mindful. And I remember I wasn't mindful one time, and I was in an angry moment, and a friend of mine, they were trying to encourage me, to get help and to go out and do things when they want to, I just wanted to be left alone. That's what I wanted. I just wanted people to leave me alone. So I wasn't mad when my friends left me, things like that. And the ones that were around me, I was so used to pushing people away, I was trying to push them away, right? And a friend, one of my really good friends, he told me, he goes, Jake wouldn't want you to do this. And I remember turning around to him and stared him dead in his face. I said, well, he's dead, so he ain't got nothing to say about it, do it. I turned around, I took 3 steps, and my heart failed, because I realized what I had just did. See, and I forgot the relationship that my friend had with my son as well. So that was like his nephew. And so me being a father in an angry state, I was tired. I wanted to push, and I came back at him very, very aggressively. And he just turned around and he looked at me. And instead of getting mad, he said, if I didn't know you, I would punch you in your mouth for what you just said to me. And he gave me that different perspective. And I apologized to him afterwards, right? But I knew it in that moment. It was time for me to shut up and take what he had to say to me, because I totally disrespected him in that aspect. He said, your son is like my nephew. Why would you think I'd say that? Why would you say that to me? I just looked at him, and he just pulled down his pen. I was like,
yeah,
no excuse. You able to say that except for I got to wrap up with emotion, and I can only apologize to it. but it's going to take me a moment to wrap my head around everything that's been going on.
That's
So,
right.
and he goes, looks, smiled on his face. He goes, you know what? I'm still here. I'm just a little upset with you right now, but I'm still here. And
That's
so
right.
since, and I was in a family leadership training class to become a family leader to help people
Mhm.
in our custody services and things like that. And they came up with a concept called IOVE, intellect over emotion.
Yeah,
You
I've
know?
heard of that. Yep.
Yeah, so it was like those little things, and I didn't understand how big of an impact that it would have in my intellectual growth when it came down to grief. And so the rational side was the intellectual side, and
Hmm.
I did the way to let my emotions override my intellect, because I felt that once my emotions overrode that, I pretty much dictated the conversation in the direction I wanted to go in, and I forgot that it wasn't about me, right? And
Hmm.
so I practice that all the time. If I find myself becoming emotional, I switch myself over. And I tell myself immediately, this is not about you. They're not here for your story or your emotions. They're here for your intellect and the tools that you carry with you
That's right.
and your perspective. And so, and I'm real careful not to offer advice, but I offer suggestions, right?
Yeah.
Things that are universal that you can pick. You may not need them at that moment, but at least you have them in your tool belt.
Hmm.
So, and building that community, I think that's also important to be able to drop these tools off to these individuals and let them use it
Yep.
at their discretion when they
Yep.
feel that they need it, right?
Yep.
You can just
Yep.
pull it out and go, oh, I remember, this was being said right here. I want to try this right here, and I encourage people all the time, just explore it.
Yeah.
If it don't work, try something new.
Yeah.
It may not be what you need at that moment, and maybe you need it somewhere down the line. So don't just
Mhm.
discard it, but
That's right.
put it back in your tool belt and carry it with you for a little bit. You just never know.
That's right. Yeah, and I encourage exploration to explore different perspectives. You may look at it and say, most may not have any meaning for me right now, but release any expectation that it has to have immediate meaning for you. But if you choose to, hold on to the teaching, hold on to the tool, and down the road, as you continue to grow, maybe you'll be able, that tool might come into your toolbox. But just keep an open mind towards it and consider it if that's something that you choose to do. And and I'm a firm believer in that. We can't reshape our perspectives about anything unless we are willing to explore and we're open to that.
Right.
And we're open to that. We can't do it. And the other thing, you'd mentioned, and that obviously is a very good friend of yours to say that if I didn't know you as well as I did, I would have punched you out. But he also said, hey, I'm still here. I'm upset with you, but I'm still here. And those are the kind of people we need that understand, that can see beyond our anger and look really truly into your soul and see what's going on beyond that. And a lot of times, Tony, and I've dealt with angry clients, and a lot of times individuals and communities are fearful of anger. But anger, unless you have an individual who has a history of criminality, who has antisocial tendencies, who is a psychopath or a sociopath, where anger is kind of a part of their everyday persona and control that goes with it. A lot of people who are angry are hurting people. Their anger is like, I don't want you to get close to me because I don't want you to see what's going on inside of me. So we keep people at bay with our anger. And in some ways, it's like we think it kind of keeps us safe. But then we get to a point where we start seeing that our anger has alienated a lot of different people in whatever community we're a part of. And then we need to have we need to have a moment of reckoning and say, do we want to choose to take a look at what's going on beyond the anger, or do we want to continue to stay angry and have any opportunity to be a meaningful part of any community that could help us? But anger is typically, for many people, a mask in terms of what's going on with something else. It hides hurt, it hides sadness, it hides feelings of low confidence, inadequacy. And once we can build through that and we can empower individuals to work through those emotions, they have more feelings of self-efficacy, where they feel like they can make a difference in the world, difference for themselves, a difference in their communities that they're a part of. And they also feel empowered to do so. And they will empower others, through example.
I love
And in
that.
terms, other communities outside of that community will continue to grow because they will inspire those within because of their leading by example, because of their willingness to be vulnerable, their willingness to be authentic.
And I think that's that. I love, like I said, I love what you just said right there because it's something. Since I've started this work, it was a commitment that I made to myself, and a promise that I made to my son. And it was I promised to leave people better than what I found.
Mm-hmm.
And I to never contribute to someone else's bad day because you never know what they're going through. And
That's
so
right.
I have to take that so they can walk away from me with a smile on their face. I know the next person that comes around them, they're going to transfer that energy over to them because someone took time to let them know that it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
It took the time to make them want to laugh. They saw them not wanting to be bothered with anyone. Just a simple hello, maybe crack a joke or something like that. Does wonders for people. And I think as people, especially in a time of grief and things like that, that compassion, and I tell everybody, I'm a servant. I'm not a leader, I'm a servant. And my job is to serve my gift to you. And my gift demands, it demands me to leave you better. And that's my burden that I carry. My gift says, no, you don't get to use me for negative stuff. I'm not that sort of gift. My gift says my job is to give you this so you can make them better. So when they leave you, they'll carry on the rest of their day in a better mindset. I just wow.
And just to throw a different perspective on you with that, I know you said that's your burden to carry. I would think that's your responsibility and your destiny to carry. This is what you were destined to do, as anybody like myself or you or anybody who commits to a field of service or to a life of service. We were destined. And the circumstances that got us there weren't the prettiest circumstances. And losses, there isn't anything pretty about going through the actual loss. But it's the challenges that occurred as a result of that destined us to be who we were. I told people, I said, I would never thought I would have been embarking on the path that I'd be embarking on now at this stage of my life. But if this is the path that the universe or God or my higher power, however we can start to conceptualize that, has opened up for me, then I'm going to walk it willingly and I'm not going to question it because, there's a greater purpose beyond the obvious. And I need to trust in God's will. I need to trust in the universe's will. I need to trust that this is where I'm needed the most. Right. And so whenever I have an opportunity to either go into a community, to work with somebody, and I got an opportunity to, a good friend of mine who is a director of a retreat center asked me if I would assist with the bereavement support group. And I've done this before, but I've been out of it for a while. But I was nudged to contact her when I did about a couple of different things. So I sat down and I said, this isn't about me. I could take a look and I could choose to say yes for or no for obvious reasons. But I had to sit down and literally from a sacred perspective, I said, is this where the universe, is this where God wants me to be in this moment? And once I determined that that's where he wanted me to be in that moment, then I said, let's come in. I said to her, the message I gave her said, let's do this. Let's build a community together that, is based on shared principles of help, of love, so, that happened, right around, believe it or not, I reached out to her. I met with her, I believe it was, when did I meet with her? The day after my daughter Janine's birthday on April 20th. I met with her on April 28th, the day after that. So, and I got nudged to reach out to her just around the time of my daughter's birthday. So as if my daughter, her spirit guides, the ancestors, they were telling me, this is where God needs you now. This is where we need you now for however long it needs to be. So I don't question anymore. I just say if God wants me to be here, then I'm in this moment, then I'm going to be here. And so, and sometimes the communities find us, Tony, before we find them, and we also have to be aware of that.
That is very true, man. I laugh because I can relate to that so much. You know, I can say now when I figured it out and how much sense it made to me, I started doing things like I went and got certified just to see if I could do it. Never read a book on any of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do it to show it off to anyone. I did it to see if this what I was thinking was real, right? I've never thought about this before. I never asked to do anything like this. So the first thing I did is that, you know, coming from someone who's an alcoholic and things like that, and you know, going into recovery and understanding the walk that it took me to get there. You know, when I got my certification, I sat down and I looked at the questions, and it just made sense to me. So I did. It was like, oh, okay. So then the next one, you know, because I'm certified in suicide prevention, and so I got my gateway certification. And I sat down and I looked at it and I was going, all of this makes sense because I've walked this path before. So I got that one. And I was like, no, this can't be what, I denied it. I kicked it around. I fought it so long. And then I got my mental health first aid certification because it made sense to me, right? I was just going, no. Mm-mm. And so I argued with myself in a mirror, like, are you crazy? Who does this? Like, no. But it wouldn't let me go. It really wouldn't let me go. I couldn't. That's all I thought about. That's all I thought about. Like, you know, what is this thing? You know, and I started to make sense out of it. And I would sit down with myself. And then people would ask me, so how did you get through it? Well, I learned to sit down with myself. So you learning to sit, you sitting down with your grief? Is that what that is? They were like, yeah, you're learning to sit with your grief. I was like, yeah, because it makes sense. My grief is teaching. They go, wow. They go, and what are you doing about this? And I go, well, you know, when I'm talking with people, they lay that stuff on me. I go somewhere and I release it, and I'm so much better. Like I don't carry it with me. They're like, so who's teaching you this? Like no one. It just makes sense to me. And now I realize it's what I'm destined to do. It's my purpose in this world is to take this knowledge that has been given to me and to give it to as many people that will receive it. And that makes me happy. But also, it taught me something about love languages, right? I never knew what love languages was. People used to always tell me. I'm a very intelligent person, but there's some things that I was just ignorant about. I'm not afraid to admit it. And so when people was talking about love languages, I'm like, what is love language? No, what is this thing? And then one day a friend of mine gave me the book of love languages. And that book sat on my shelf for 6 months before I even picked it up. And someone just said, pick it up. And when I picked it up, I went to a page where acts of service. Because the things that I was doing was making me feel good. And I thought I was selfish, right? Because I'm doing it because I love the feeling that I get from it. And so when I read it, I realized that acts of service was part of my love language. And so I kind of like fell into it. I really just fell into it. And when I began to understand the process that I was going through and the journey of becoming more of my authentic self in my grief, it made me want to expand. It made me want to explore all these other different areas because I wanted to be efficient in it, right? But I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I really didn't. And it's like, as you said, I started questioning it. I was like, if this is what I'm meant to do, then show me something else.
Yeah.
Right? And then people were asking me to come and tell my story. I was going, what do you need to hear my story? My story is just like everyone else's. Right? At least that's what I thought. But they saw something in it that I didn't see. And so the first time I did share my story, was in front of a nice little audience, and I'm an introvert, so I didn't like talking, right? Building that community around myself, right? I'm like, oh, what is going on? But then I heard something. This, a man in his gift will make room for him. And I realized that everything that my gift was doing was pushing out all of this useless stuff that I didn't need. And it began to put me around people that was able to feed it more, to help me manifest myself into this world a lot more. And the sense of awareness and authenticity and truth that came behind it. I've been standing in that ever since then. And I've been walking that path ever since then. And I would tell you now, it was the best decision I ever made. Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here. You know, I'd still be struggling. But for some odd reason, this is where my heart pulls me, and that's where I go. I always encourage people, follow your heart. There's a difference between your passion and following your heart. Your passion is what's going to help you set up, but your heart is what's going to take you to the next steps. You got to follow that. Let your soul guide you. And so I couldn't see myself doing anything other than what I'm doing right now. Even with all the sacrifices I had to make to get here, I realized that most of the sacrifices were needed to be made, right? And I was just determined to be better. You know, I'm trying to be the best. I just want to be better than I was yesterday. That's all it was. I'm chasing me. Right.
I put my money on you that you'll be better yesterday than better today than you were yesterday. That will continue, and that's the ongoing process of transformation too. I mean, I was telling in the workshop today. I said, sometimes the transformation is so stark for me. I don't know who I was a week ago. The person I was a week ago, I wouldn't even begin to recognize, depending on what's going on at this point. And certainly, if you ask me who I was at 47. After Janine transitioned, when I was the age of Janine transitioned, that guy's long gone. I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell you who he was, because I have become a more evolved person. And I think one of the things you'd mentioned is that no matter how old we are, I think the other thing is that we need to commit to continue to learn from each other. In a community of grief, one of the things I think facilitators, or let's say the person who is seen as the prime mover or facilitator or leader of that group, can sometimes think, well, I have all the answers. And we know I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. Other people don't have all the answers. But, together we can come pretty close. If we, as a community, are safe enough to ask the questions that we have no knowledge about, we can become smarter individually, more aware individually, and more aware collectively. But I tell my students every day, I said, I don't have the answers to everything, but together we can kind of almost come close to figuring some things out that we couldn't figure out singularly. So in class, I try to build a community by saying, look, we're all in this together. I'm not your teacher. I am your instructor, but we're all we're in this together. We're walking down the same path where, my job is to guide you to perspectives that are going to help you learn, whether it's more about death, dying, and bereavement, whether it's more about psychology-based principles. I just want you to come out of here better than you were. But it's not going to be because I have all the answers. It's going to be together we're going to come close to having all the answers. And you have to, I need you to invest. And I said, plus, if I talk for more than 15 minutes without somebody asking me a question, somebody's going to have to wake me up because I'll get bored listening to my own voice. So I basically put it on them and said, if you want your instructor to fall asleep, don't talk. But I also encourage them to challenge what they hear, do it respectfully, bring their perspectives to the forefront. Those communities that are healthy look at challenges as not as something to be feared, but something as an opportunity for growth. And that's the other key to that. But we have to be safe. We have to create norms and an atmosphere where that's going to happen, where people are going to share without fear of being judged. Where we ask questions, it's what you believe. We don't say to somebody, what you believe is irrelevant. It's like, how did you come? Educate me in terms of how you came to that perspective. How did you come to this this perspective. I want to be able to understand it so I can better relate to it. That's the message. That's how we bring people who are diverse in existing communities. We bring them together by seeking to understand and trying to learn from it.
Also, like you said before, I encourage facilitators to learn from the people that are walking, right? That are just now starting and things like that, because we get so far ahead, we tend to forget that beginning stages of that walk, and I believe there's hidden lessons in there that we forgot, that it can be beneficial to us as we become better, right? More efficient. And so I love sitting down with people in their muck. I really do. I love sitting down with them because I don't have to hide.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense of authenticity in that muck with them.
Yep.
From your true self.
Yep.
But it's also a reflection of the things that you've gone through, because I've listened to people, I've sat down with people in their muck where they're just, life is punching them every which way but loose. And it don't seem like it's going to be letting them go. Now, I understand going through that. I understand what it took for me to come through the other side. But it's the little things that I missed.
Yeah.
Sitting down with them and listening to them, I just go, wow, okay, I get where you're coming from now. I can relate from that point. But it also puts me in those moments with them, right? Because they're sharing their truest feelings with you.
Yeah.
And they're taking you to moments that if you had been there with them, you know what I'm saying, you can write a book, sign.
Mm-hmm.
But I love them. Take me there with them and help me experience that. You know, experience that, and I sit there because I'm in awe. Because they're very vulnerable.
Yeah. And the other thing is that when we establish ourselves as listeners, people are going to tell us their stories. And they're the stories of who they lost, the significance of the relationship, understanding it through their eyes is important. I think to build effective communities, I think what needs, for me, a requirement is that we look at everybody's story as a gift to us or in each other. If you are gifting me with your story, Tony, I look at that as the ultimate gift to me, because you trust me enough to tell me about the most intimate things that have ever happened to you. And a lot of times individuals will say, how can you continue to play in the energy of grief? How can you listen to people's stories about that? It's got to be sad. I said, yeah, it's sad. There's always a sad element to loss. But do you realize what a gift that is to me, that they're willing to share their worst moments with me, that they trust me enough to hold a sacred space for their stories, to honor their stories, to validate their loss? I said, that inspires me. And everybody's story is a gift to me. And somebody will tell me, well, Dave, your story is a gift to me. Well, it works both ways. It works both ways. I have gotten inspired by so many people's stories, and it's just, I look at it and I say, I carry that. I carry a piece of their transition loved ones with me every time they share a story. I will carry that piece somewhere within me because they shared that with me. For a moment, I became a part of their family, whether it was their soul family, their extended family. I maybe became one of those transient angels that they also trusted with their story. And in communities of grief, we honor each other's stories. And everybody can be a placeholder for everybody else's story. And in communities of grief that are working, everybody's committed to that. It's just not the person who built that community or who built that. It's everybody buys into that narrative, buys into that this is how we inspire each other. This is how we inspire ourselves. The job to me of good facilitators, Tony, and my good friend, Reverend Patty Farino taught me this, is we inspire, it's not about inspiring teachers, it's inspiring masters through our knowledge, through our walk, through our example, to have them inspire and build other teachers who in turn will become masters and inspire. And it's like kind of like that trickle down theory for me. And one other thing before I forget, and I got to say this, if you don't mind, because sometimes that's a concession to age. Sometimes I like I'll have to say something before I forget it. So, but I'm doing okay for a guy in his mid-60s. So, but anyway, to get back to that, an object lesson, just in terms of building a community. And you mentioned this earlier, and I've watched this at Utica University, where I'll open a door for somebody.
Yeah.
And in turn, they'll look back and hold open a door for somebody else, or somebody will hold open a door for me, and I'll say, hey, one good turn deserves another, and I'll get the door for them. And what it does is that it just kind of builds that kind of good feeling vibe, but it builds a feeling of community and teamwork that we're all in together. There's something like that, just holding a door open for somebody. Just has that trickle down effect. And if you wanted to do an object lesson to build a group of people and make them build them into a community, that might be a place to start. Have them just hold the door open for each other. Do something nice, positive exchange. See what happens. Maybe they may begin to say, hey, this is pretty cool. And they may say lay the groundwork for them to come together on different levels. So thank you. I had to say that before I forgot it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you saying that, because again, we've walked the same paths, just on different sides, and talking about it's like you're taking everything that I've been thinking about and you're throwing it back at me like, see, you're not the only one. And I enjoy that, right? Because there's a sense of a huge understanding. I understand that I'm not crazy, and we speak in the same language. So again, the same thing that we talked about before is being around a community that understands the language that you're speaking. And it's nothing being disrespectful, but understanding where you are.
Yep.
Being aware of what people are saying and how are you feeling about what they're saying. So I can sit around and we can talk about these things because I can relate to it.
Yeah.
And I just relate to it. I've walked, right? And it's like, it makes me feel good. It really does, because it's reciprocated, it's understood. There's no taking anything personal, because it's like, wow, it's like, wow, there's a sense of truth and authenticity in all of it.
And Tony, it's just about respecting, like with me and Chris, it's respecting how we walk our paths. It's shared values. We may do it differently. We may have different tools in the toolbox, or we may see some things differently, but it doesn't mean we can't be friends. It doesn't mean that we can't coexist. It just means that the tools that work for you may be working better than the tools that I'm using. But it doesn't mean that there isn't any common ground. I mean, we take a look at shared values. I look at things like integrity, authenticity, genuineness, commitment to service, benevolence, beneficence, working for the common good. I think both you and I do that. We may do it differently. We may do it in different settings or communities, but we do it. And we can learn from each other just because we have those shared values. And because I respect what you have done in your path to transcend and find meaning after the loss of your son. And I would hope that you or anybody else would respect what I've done and the tools that I've used and how I've used them with those same shared values that you have. And that's what it's about. Do we share the same values? If we don't, then we need to find a community that can mirror those. And it isn't anything like to take personally. It's just, hey, man, we're not meshing right now. But does it mean we can't mesh down the road? No. But maybe at this moment, we weren't meant to. We were meant to kind of explore our own path separately. And then maybe we come back together and say, hey, now we got some more common ground.
Yeah. And again, it's understanding and walk your story. Your story is someone else's survival guide. I think that's huge, right? You want people that do want to share their stories with you, find some sort of relation, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we look for in stories. We're looking for inspiration, right? As a matter of fact, when I first started podcasting, it was an idea. I was like, you know what, I need to figure out some more of these things, right? And that was just a great way. No one ever thought about it or anything like that. We just was trying to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, if I can talk to enough of these men about what they've gone through, things like that, maybe that's going to, give me the inspiration to get up another day. Or, what I'm saying, I was trying to learn, right? Because I had one teach me. I was trying to learn. And so it's like, well, this is the best way to do it. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're just going to figure it out as we go. And opening up the doors and doing podcasting, that's exactly what it did, because I was able to talk to so many men across the board, right? And I'm like what you call the silent student. I'm the one that's always sitting back quiet, and I want to listen to you and things like that, because I want to learn. That's all it was. My curious mind wanted to just learn. It wasn't a matter of, I didn't know where it was going to take me, how long I was going to do this, because there's a lot of bumps in the road as you start to go through it. But once you start to understand, it's the process. It's the process that you're going through, and not to get mad at it. But I wanted something. I wanted something for the pain that I was in. I wanted someone to tell me, did you go through similar things to the one I went through? And how did you do it?
That's right.
I wanted someone to encourage me and inspire me. And what it did exactly that. It did exactly that. And I thank all of the people that came on the show and talked to me in the beginning stages, because that's exactly what it did. It inspired me. It gave me hope that, the next steps in my life was going to be better. I am going to be better. I am going to do better, and I'm going to give as much as I can. And that's where the final decision came from. It's like, I'm committed to it. Yeah. If these guys can do it, and they're successful, and they're doing all of these things, it wasn't the success of what they were doing. It was the success of being where they were, happy and, still dealing with the day-to-day things, but they were living a good life. They were peaceful and happy, accepting the emotions that they were going through. And I had no one to teach me, but that's how I learned. Yeah. I learned that it was okay to not be okay. Right. Yeah. And so they just gave me so much, man. Everything that I was going through, they just gave me that encouragement to get up and go, you know what, I want to talk to another person. And what I didn't realize what was going on is that I'm getting something from them, and they were getting something from me. Right? I didn't know I was giving them anything. I didn't think I knew that much to give someone. So, I didn't really think that, it was a big thing. Back and go, man, your story, when we talk, you inspired me to do this. And I'm going, I don't know how I did that, but thank you. But I tell them that, like, I'm humbled because I learned so much from you than I ever thought, as I was going. So I thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with me, and showing me that it is possible to find peace in this world. In these communities and things like that. I just have to set my boundaries and be open to allow people to help me take down those boundaries. Right? And I wanted to just give. I just want to give people. I want to give people the opportunity. Just like what we're doing today, and for the next 72 hours, this global grief conference and everything. And I really hope that people are taking advantage and listening to these awesome speakers and picking up pin pads, seeing a schedule. Come and join us, man. This has been a blast. This has truly been a blast. I know it's getting late on your end, isn't it?
I'm sorry, Tony, I didn't catch that.
I said it's getting late on your end, isn't it?
It's about 10 to 10, and I'm looking over in the chat, and I think we got a 10-minute queue a couple of minutes ago, I think, from
we got someone else. We got another great speaker coming behind us. But I want people to stay tuned, because we have a lot more great speakers and workshops coming. And like I said, this is 72 hours. And so enjoy it. catch in when you can. Maybe you'll catch the recording afterwards, but come and join us. Come in and enjoy the knowledge that we're sharing with you, and help you on your way of healing, and connect with them afterwards as well. Until the next time, you guys will see us again. We got some pretty interesting stuff coming up.
Mhm.
So, hey, thank you for jumping on with me and helping people understand how to build those communities around their grief and sharing your knowledge and your walk with them. So until the next time, you guys
Okay.
together and just enjoy.
Tony, thanks for asking me to jump on. As always, I could talk to you for another 2 hours. So
I know we got someone scheduled, and that's why they said we got someone scheduled. So we're gonna get off of that. Them jump on, and then but we will again because I'm constantly sitting here going over things. And one of the things that I was just talking about, I want to bring in a panel, get about 6 of us in there to talk about some interesting topics. We'll see how tomorrow. We'll see what comes about it. Though.
You got it. Yeah, I'm going to be around all weekend, so just keep me in mind.
All right, my brother.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right.
I'll see you soon.
Yep, you will see me soon.
You got it. Take care. Bye bye, Tony. Bye, Josh. Goodbye, Nate. Thank you.
Hi, Dave. Thank you.